The Tax Office is one of the biggest government agencies in the country and among the most secretive. A Four Corners investigation has found the organisation set up to protect our revenue is failing us badly, with over $50 billion in taxes uncollected. For more on this, I'm joined by investigative reporter Angus Grigg. Angus, this is the subject of your story tonight. So let's first set the scene for that story. Tell us about the case of a woman that you call Sarah and how she was able to take advantage of this ATO scam.
Yeah, well, about 10 years ago, the ATO went really big on digitisation, and what it did is it brought into being a very good application that allowed your GST refunds to essentially be claimed via your mobile phone. And look, this was a really sort of low-touch system, if you like, and it was designed to keep money moving through the economy. The big problem was that it didn't really have a fraud detection system. Indeed, a couple of years ago, the auditor-general warned that the fraud detection systems within the ATO were no better than random selection. So you had a very good system that was very good at moving money through the economy, keeping businesses liquid, if you like, but it couldn't detect fraud. And so that basically allowed this huge GST scam, known as the sort of TikTok fraud, to be perpetrated. And in the end, $2 billion was stolen from us, from the ATO, and within that, about 56,000 people perpetrated this fraud. And one of these people who we spoke to, we call Sarah in Mildura, was exactly this. So she pretended to be a hairdresser, pretended to have set up a hairdressing business, claimed about $30,000 in fake GST refunds. And the really crucial thing is here that she wasn't required to show any receipts, any verification for these refunds. And that was the massive flaw in the ATO system. And partly the reason for that is that they sacked many of the people who used to work in GST verification when the Abbott government came to power and there was a huge clean out of the public service. So you had this, really state-of-the-art system which allowed very fast, large amounts of money to be processed very quickly, but it didn't have a fraud detection system. So it basically meant anyone could go on, enter a few numbers, and within a couple of weeks get a very large GST refund.
And as you say, Angus, Sarah, as you're calling her, she was one of many. What stopped this scam?
Look, in the end, the ATO finally got its fraud detection system up and running, and that allowed it to, finally crack down on this. But as I said, 56,000 people perpetrated this fraud. Only 122 have so far been convicted. Of the $2 billion stolen from the ATO, from us, only around $160 million has been retrieved. And so the big issue here is that while the ATO finally caught up with these people, they paid the money in the first place. And a lot of these people are on welfare in lower sort of socio-economic groups. And so their ability to ever pay this back is almost zero. And that was the case of the person we spoke to in Mildura, who we're calling Sarah.
And what has been the ATO's explanation and I guess wider narrative about how this was able to happen?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a bit of a confusing response, actually, from the ATO. What we do know is that in the years leading up to this scam, the ATO was explicitly warned that its fraud detection systems weren't working. What they then set about doing was to try and implement a new system. But basically the system was running late. It was 12 months late. And so what happened is that you had this huge fraud being perpetrated, but the ATO didn't really have the systems to identify this fraud before the money was being paid out. And that was really the big problem here. Now, the ATO now say that they are on top of it, that they cracked down hard on this fraud. And that might be true in this particular instance. But frauds like this, they evolve. And so what we're seeing now is ID fraud has become a very big issue for the ATO, where someone basically steals your details and then puts in a fake GST claim on your behalf. And then you have to try and justify to the ATO why it wasn't you. So once again, the systems that the ATO have aren't really working to prevent this type of thing.
Angus Grigg from Four Corners, looking forward to that report tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Gemma.
And of course, you can see that full story on Four Corners tonight at 8:30 on ABC TV and of course anytime on iView.